In addition to sharing some of the things that I've learned, I also am interested in trying to get more people who are studying wildlife tracking sign to get involved in projects. There's a lot of citizen science projects going on. In New York State, where I'm from, we're doing we're wrapping up the last year of a several-year project surveying the distribution of mammal species on Long Island. And believe it or not, it's going into 2025. We've never done a mammal survey of the state of New York. And there's been a lot of changes with reintroduction projects and increases in conservation in a lot of the species in New York State. Now on Long Island, we we're kind of an offshoot of the big state picture, and a lot of the big tracts of open space. And there's a lot more different big species that have large territories upstate New York. We tend to get the short end of the stick when it comes to doing these surveys and different wildlife projects. We're like a forgotten area of New York State. So I work for Seatuck Environmental Association as a wildlife biologist, and I do a lot of projects on Long Island, and I have developed a relationship with some of the staff people that work for the state. For example, New York State Natural Heritage, and I made sure that we were going to get part of the action. So, on the other hand, on the other side of the coin, the New York State Museum hired a guy, Paul Connor, back in the early 60s, and he did a survey of the mammals of Long Island. A lot of it was interviewing naturalists on Long Island, very knowledgeable naturalists and wildlife biologists. But he did do a fair bit of small mammal trapping as well. So that was done in the 60s. So even for Long Island, it's a long period of time, basically half a century since we've examined the distribution of mammals. And there's been a lot of changes on Long Island itself, not just its state in general. So we have a big citizen science component to this, using iNaturalist as a database. You can just submit your photos. We take roadkills, which are indicative of distribution. And a lot of people today have trail cameras, so that's been very helpful. And I think we have around 2,000 people just for the Long Island part of the New York State Mammal Survey involved in submitting stuff to iNaturalist. It's been great. And then for those of you who have got into doing field work, you're out trying to answer one question, and you get more other questions that crop up than you do get answers. So I find that really exciting and interesting. So we'll move on here. So I wanted to start out with, again, a plea for people to get involved. You guys have, I'm sort of a novice intermediate track and sign person, so I still have a lot to learn, as I just learned in that mock eval. One thing I have noticed over the many years I've been doing wildlife research on Long Island is that this track and sign is not taught in a lot of wildlife programs. Now, there are other expertise people have, like modeling and things like that, and statistical analysis of data. experimental design, but I shouldn't have been shocked, I guess, but I'm talking to the person who's coordinating the New York State Mammal Survey and saying, you know, CTUC wants to help out and be a partner in this effort, and we're going to focus on Long Island. And they said to me, now this is a professor, and they said to me, oh, go to our webpage, and you can see what all that protocols are and the data we're collecting, yada, yada, yada. And this is the first thing that came up. And this was labeled, this photo was taken at Stony Brook University campus on Long Island, on the quad. And it was labeled as white-tailed deer. I'm wondering what you people think about that. Any suggestions? Now, there's no scale, but just look at that pattern and what kind of jumps out at you.
Squirrel.
Squirrel.
Yeah. So gray squirrel. So I pointed out that, oh my God, I just found this thing and it's misidentified, and they were like, oh, let me see. No, that's white-tailed deer. You can see the dew claws registering in the shallow. So I think it's not a good start of our relationship. So I backed off, and I got in touch with people like Sophie on the Northeast Tracker Facebook page, and I said, could you guys weigh in on where do you think this is? Everybody got white-tailed deer. So, I mean, sorry, gray squirrel, not white-tailed deer. So we did get that changed on the website page. But yeah, I think unfortunately this is a lost skill among many wildlife biologists, and not only that, but as people who are training wildlife biologists in universities and colleges that really don't have the background to correct this thing. So it's awesome what this group is doing, and the cyber tracker thing is really fantastic. I think much needed. Related to this, came up with this. Most of my research since 2008 has been on river otters. And I came up with this thing, and I was really surprised to see Jonah Evans and Mark Elbrock listed as authors. So they published this paper in 2009, and they gave basically a sort of a cyber tracker eval to Texas Wildlife Unit staff. They had just finished a several-year survey of the state of Texas to look for where otters had established home ranges. And unfortunately, Mark and Jonah got involved when they had just finished the study. So the surveys were conducted over the course of 5 years. And then I think it was Jonah actually that realized, oh my God, you know, being out with some of the staff, they don't have the right training for this. And he got hold of Mark, and they decided to do this eval. 37% of tracks that were identified as otter were misidentified. And 26% of tracks identified as swamp rabbit, raccoon, opossum, and other species were misidentified as otter. So there you have a bunch of people that spend a lot of time in the field, and none of these wildlife unit agencies, these state agencies, they don't, you know, they're not real. They don't have the funding to go around and do these different things whenever they need to. They're short-funded, they're short-staffed, so this is really a big bummer because the data set is really unreliable. Kind of a waste of time and people's energy. So I ran into this situation with the staff that were hired to survey Long Island for otters in the winter of 2017 and 18. I ran into the techs in the field, and I said, "What are you guys doing?" I said, "Well, we're surveying for otters." I said, "Wow, that's what I'm doing. I didn't know you guys were doing this." And I had given them my report from years ago, but it wasn't shared with them. So I said, "Well, what kind of a survey are you doing?" And they're like, "Well, we just have to fill in these blocks. So we have these blocks, these grids, and we just drive to a spot that's close to the water where we can get out, and we walk 200 yards one direction, 200 actually meters." So they were doing meters because they're scientists. 200 meters in each direction looking for otter sign. So I said, "What are you doing here?" There's no, you really want to be looking for otter latrines. A quarter of a mile away, you could have driven your car right up to this earthen dam where there were, scats all over the place. But they were at the edge of the salt marsh. There's not going to be any otter sign there. It would be 1,000,001 shot of running into any otter sign in the salt marsh area. So again, the lack of training and frustrated young, eager staff, they came up with, I don't know how many people they had hired, but I was solo. I recorded 77 latrines in 26 different watersheds that year, that winter. And they recorded 4 otter latrines in 4 different watersheds. And one of those was the one I took them to. So anyway, point being, we need to do more of this, and we need to infiltrate into all these different wildlife projects and make sure they're being done right and get good data. So getting back to my river otter study, in 2007, I had some free time, and I had someone who was willing to give me funding. So I talked to the DEC. They weren't sure if there were any river otters established on Long Island. They also told me, I said, "Well, where would you go if you had to start somewhere?" They said, the Carmen's River. There's the fishermen there report lots of otter slides. So I went and canoed that and checked for the otter latrines along that. And what they were talking about, a lot of otter slides is a tip-off that it's not really otter. So what they were referring to were where waterfowl climbed out of the water up the bank and just sat on the first level area they came to for resting sites. Some nesting sites, but mostly just resting sites. So I interviewed the wildlife agency staff in the adjacent areas, so New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and one of the things that makes it very difficult for wildlife species to recolonize Long Island. A lot of things were wiped out during the fur trade era, and then actually bounties, wolf and bobcat were wiped out in the 1700s, early 1800s. Long Island was settled in the 1600s, so a lot of stuff happened. There was no regulations on taking wildlife. And now it's a really difficult thing for a lot of terrestrial mammals to make it over. So I figured, okay, I'm doing this survey, I should probably focus on the East End where there's a lot of open space. And in terms of otters, the widest point across Long Island Sound is 21 miles. So I phoned John Coolish, who I studied with, and it was a good friend of mine. He was a professional wildlife trapper. growing up, and so into the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, he hung up his traps in the 60s when he realized people were willing to, he can make a living taking people out in the woods and teaching them about wildlife. He was an awesome naturalist. But high school educated, and he just basically did the math. I call him, you think otters can make it over from Connecticut? 21 miles. He's like, yeah, let me think about that. They can swim 7 miles an hour. That's a 3-hour trip. They should be able to come over from any point. Okay. So I figured I'd focus my effort out in the East End. But my results were most otter sign I found on the western end on the North Shore of Long Island, and a little bit of otter sign over on the East End. And I set up a trail cam on the East End, and it was out for a year, and I only had one otter in all the images. There were never more than one otter. These were a bunch of latrine sites out there. And the date stamped on it, I could never say, well, there was an otter here on Shelter Island. At the same time, there was one up here on the North Fork. So it appeared to be, its possibility is just one otter. And if you do the home range size, it kind of fit that. They have very large home ranges. So then I go into the literature, which I should have done before, but I was anxious to get going. And I find out, based on a telemetry study funded after the Exxon Valdez spill out in Alaska, coastal Alaska, the maximum recorded open water crossing for otters was 7 kilometers, or 4.3 miles. So do you have any idea why otters would not be able to make open water crossings longer than that in terms of dispersing juveniles from Connecticut? I mean, what about their life history and behavior?
They have super fast metabolisms.
Yeah.
Are they able, I'm just thinking about
do they have the endurance to swim across?
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that, actually. Good point. But if they're swimming in the water, why couldn't they just catch fish if they needed to?
So I think about where they would hunt. In deeper, more open waters, it would be harder to find.
Yes, they are. Their adaptations for hunting prey are shallow water. They trap fish and crab up against the shoreline, or they're hunting under rocks and things like that. Yeah. So that also is part of their dispersal pattern. They stay in inshore waters. Also, they like to be around areas that have some structure. So we'll talk a little bit about that later in terms of dispersing and movement patterns on Long Island. The other thing that we speculate, and again, this gets back to a lot of questions. We don't know the answer to that. Their eyes are adapted to, the really important thing is to see underwater where their prey is. To see on land is a whole different thing. They don't really need to pick things out. They can rely on some other senses, but water's like safety. They take to the water if they're threatened. The latrines are all very close to water. Their resting sites are generally very close to water. So it may be that they're nearsighted and they can't really detect land that's a landmass that's that far away from the shore. So this is the, using that 4.3 miles formula, this is the area where they can come across and recolonize Long Island right here. And that lines up with where I found the most otter latrines, and later on the most otters in my trail cam photos, up to 3. And this is the furthest west latrine site right here in 2008. Now, going back to this here, there was a 40-mile gap. And I was wondering, like, what's going on over here? They could make it over to Great Gull Island and Plum Island from Fisher's Island. Fisher's Island is only 2 miles off of Rhode Island. So I wanted to explore that, so I asked the Fisher's Island Conservancy if they would fund a river otter survey on Fisher's Island. We had no information about that either. So then they came back with, we discussed this at our last meeting, and we were not sure why you want to look for river otters on Fisher's Island. We don't have any rivers. Good question. I didn't think to put that in my proposal. Unfortunately, the common name river otter seems to imply that they're specifically freshwater species, but they do really well in estuarine waters. And actually, estuarine waters have more abundant prey resources for river otters than inland freshwater systems. And so the home ranges, the average home range size for coastal areas is a lot smaller. It's like less than half the size of the average home range size of the interior areas. And most of the research that's been done on river otters in North America is inland waters. Very little has been done on coastal waters. So this was the question, this series of latrines here out on the east end, and every place we looked that had all the right physical characteristics of an otter latrine on Fisher's Island had otter scat. So it was totally, any pups born on Fisher's Island were going to have to like find a home range off of Fisher's Island. They were going to have to disperse. Most probably dispersed back to Connecticut, Rhode Island, but some may have tried to make their way over on this archipelago to Long Island. And indeed,
there's some awful currents off the end of Fisher's Island in the gut there.
Right.
Which is terrible.
Right, and actually the race as well.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's a time of day, and it's like a 2-hour span when it's pretty strong, and then you have slack. So I've actually paddled from Orient over to Great Gull Island, actually. And it's very easy to avoid the rough water at any tide.
At what age are they dispersing, like?
They spend a lot of time with mom, a long period of parental care, between 8 and 12 months before they disperse. So they're almost a year old when they disperse. Okay. So I had a lot of help from colleagues, and there was a biologist. There's a couple of biologists stationed on Plum Island. It's just kind of a scary place. A lot of weird stuff going on there. So any warm-blooded animal, like mammal, that makes it to Plum Island is not supposed to leave Plum Island. So they have a crew that goes around. If a deer comes over, swims over from Orient, they gotta take it out because they're worried it's going to contract the disease. It's a very high security lab there, studying different cattle diseases and things like that. Anyway, this photograph was sent to me by the biologist there. He wasn't sure what it was, but he had never seen it before. A lot of raccoons make it over there. And this is definitely an otter trap. And then when we were on Fisher's Island, we actually came across this track, and this was a surprise to me. So Fisher's Island had breeding coyotes on the island as well. And this is before coyotes made it to Long Island. Coyotes are pretty good swimmers as well. That's a 2-mile swim.
Can you say it again?
That's a 2-mile swim for coyote from Rhode Island, Connecticut, where there's a breeding population. And they are breeding on Fisher's Island. And again, most of the pups that survive on Fisher's Island are going to have to, well, Fisher's Island's tiny, they're probably going to have to disperse. So since then, I learned that a river otter made it from Martha's Vineyard, which has a lot of river otters. There's a group there working with Biodiversity Works, Luann Johnson, some of you may know them, and Liz Baldwin. They do some great stuff. Swam to Muskegon Island. That's a big gray seal pupping area. Gray seals have their pups in December, January. And then it's a short hop over to Nantucket. And how did we document this? Tracks. Just like Plum Island. Tracking is very important. So we now know that they are capable of swimming as far as 7 miles. So back to your question, yeah, there's a long period of parental care. And why? This is another question, why? Well, some things I learned in doing this study over the years, the pups get themselves in all sorts of trouble. I think they're just very energetic and curious, and the more time they can spend with mom as teenagers, the better off they're going to be in the long run. This pup was traveling with mom and sibling in that area in western Nassau County and decided to jump into someone's backyard reflecting pool. It's concrete. It's got like 12 inches of water in it, and it couldn't get out once it got in. And mom couldn't even help it to get out. So it spent the night in the pool. The owner comes out in the morning, what's that in the, you know, at this point, this is like 20, 22 inches long. It's just a couple months old. They spend a couple months in the den. So they're like 2 months old, 2.5 months old before they actually leave the den for the first time and get a swimming lesson. Fortunately, the water was shallow enough, it didn't drown. And the guy just went out and he got this big net in the garage and he scooped it up. It was exhausted and dumped it in the lawn, and it took off to catch up with mom and its sibling. This really surprised me. I had a trail cam set up. Mom came over this earthen dam. There's a freshwater pond, and this is a tidal creek leading to a big estuary. Mom came over with the 2 pups. One pup followed mom. Another pup decides, oh, let me check this out. This is a 12-inch diameter black flexible plastic pipe. It's the overflow from the pond. You know, and it's got to be like 40 feet long. Yeah, this looks like fun. You know, so I got it coming out the other end. And this guy was caught in someone's backyard koi pond. Well, not in the pond, but on the adjacent side. So the owner, you know, these koi are worth hundreds of dollars. So the owner comes out one day and he goes, oh my God, what's going on here? I'm missing some koi. It could be osprey, it could be great blue heron, it could be, he calls nuisance control. Private company, and the guy comes over, so I bet you it's raccoons. There's raccoons, we have a lot of raccoons on Long Island. So he sets a trap, baits it to attract the raccoons. That trap is 12 inches by 12 inches by 24 inches deep. This otter could barely get in there. This is a pup. Guy comes out, he goes, oh my God, what is this? He sent me a video. He's talking to the otter, like, what are you doing here? And he had to let it go. He knew he had to let it go on site. But anyway, this has happened a couple times. Why? Was it interested in the peanut butter and oats in there? No. It's just like, this looks like a fun little thing. Let me check this out. So we get in a lot of trouble. Also, we're thinking that, winter is a whole different thing. So they were born in March on Long Island. They're out of the den for their first swimming lesson in May. And then they start traveling with mom in the fall, learning how to do the latrine dance and scent mark. And then sometime around December, January, they might start dispersing or traveling a little bit on their own, but connecting back with mom. And then most of them are gone by the time mom has her next litter, which is in March again. So sometime over the winter, they take off. But they might be hanging around a little bit just to learn some new skills they need for wintertime. So one of those skills is, how do you get into the water of a frozen pond to find something to eat? So I set up a bunch of cameras to do a year-long study of latrine use, and I documented 175 visits at 7 sites. This is a very small data set. This isn't really something I can publish. But I'm hoping to replicate this in 2025, because I have a lot more trail cameras now. The peak activity matched with the literature for inland sites, so it's a big peak in November. And then it drops off, and then there's a big peak around March, April. And the big peak in November, we think, is the mom is traveling with the pups, and she's showing them how to do the scent marking at the latrine sites. And then the next smaller peak in March, April is where she could be, they're not territorial, but she has a little core area around the natal den that she doesn't really want other male otters coming around. So there's a lot of scent marking then. And it's also, I'm receptive to mating. So the way it works is they enter estrus. A mature female will enter estrus after she gives birth to the litter. And then it's a short period, it's a couple short periods of time she's receptive to mating. So they got to communicate that. And we think they do that with scent marking. When you think about the whole thing, though, it's like crazy. The whole delayed implantation, no one's been able to come up with an acceptable hypothesis for like why they're doing this. Usually you can come up with some reason for a species that uses delayed implantation or like great horned owls nesting early. And it has to do with a lot of availability of prey early on in the season when they've got to be feeding the young. Something to do with that. But this doesn't really add up to that. Anyway, getting back to this, most of their latrine use is during the night. They're very nocturnal, especially in a place like Long Island that's highly developed. And the thing that really surprised me, though, was I'm thinking, oh, this must be where they rest. They spend 75% of their time on land, 25% of their time in water, and when they're in the water, they're probably hunting. So, and 75% of the time on land, they might be moving from one watershed to another overland, or they're resting. So obviously they're not resting at the latrine sites because, it's less than a minute usually. So 73% of their visits were of 1 minute or less. The other thing I learned in this, can I identify individual otters? Well, they don't have stripes like tigers. And with the trail cams, it's pretty much impossible. But I did track down a guy who worked in California on the coast. And his otter group all hung out at this abandoned pier. And he was able to set up a spotting scope and get really good images of the black marks, he calls them mustaches, around their mouth, and identify individuals. But boy, that's a lot of work. So that's a constraint to studying how they're moving around and how many you have. We really have to rely on DNA work. So yeah, where are they during daylight? If this is, the latrine sites are not really their hangouts, they'll rest. One day I went to retrieve a trail camera, and two otters ran out of this cattail marsh. I was in a kayak. I was going through a real little narrow passage, but I couldn't even paddle. I had to pull myself along to get to the camera site. And the big one, I assume was Mom, was making a lot of noises, and then there was another pup off in a different spot, and they were going back and forth. But the second pup that was with Mom in this cattail area, again, their curiosity, it lagged behind Mom. They wanted to check me out. And so I got a good look at it. It's kind of cool. Anyway, they took off, and I went ashore and found areas where they had matted. This is like a 6-foot section. This is another little like 2-foot by 4-foot section. They made beds, which we call couches, in the frag or the cattail. These have to be cattail.
Otter couch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I know that exists in the world, and I need to see where they
I wonder if that comes because like coucher means to lie down in French. So I wonder if it comes from like couche.
Yeah.
To be coucher, I'm gonna go lie down.
Right.
Oh, okay. Could you just describe it a little bit?
Yeah. So you know, you're in the cattail marsh. It's
A little squishy?
yeah. So I have on at the time I was wearing bean boots, and it was get up to the leather, you know, walking around. But on the couches, it's dry. So they're hanging out here, and think about it. So this really surprised me, but then the more I thought about it, nothing can really come in and bother them without making a racket going through this stuff. I got another photo here.
So, excuse me, Mike.
A little bit of close-up.
They're pulling in the cattails and
Yeah,
bending them down.
they're bending them over, patting them down, bending them over until they get a nice bed, and they're dry. And they're out in the sun. It's daytime, because night they're going to work. During the day they're just lounging around. So the way to check for these would be to use a drone. It would be an interesting thing to use. And I actually did find a lot of scat here, because they're there for quite a while. But I wouldn't classify this as a latrine site, because the scat was usually at the edge and kind of watery, and it's not going to, the scent's not going to last very long. But again, I don't know. It could be other things coming through. We'll check this out.
Question.
Yeah.
How sick are these couches?
From the water?
Yeah.
Just maybe 2 inches.
Okay.
Yeah, very low. And, oh, the other thing, so I put a trail camera up here, and I realized they had like 4 different ways to exit and get back into the water. One of them being a hole that was like a groundwater seep that they could take right out to the pond.
So Mike, just to clarify, so from the water, just about 2 inches worth of material?
Yeah, just enough to keep them dry. And they weigh like 15, 20 pounds. So, yeah, enough to support them and keep them dry.
And then, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, just one more question. So are these sort of, if you imagine a big mat of
Yeah.
cattails, are they more centrally located, you know, sort of, or are they near the edge? Or are they
They're all
mixed?
like in a cluster.
Uh-huh.
So there were like 6 of these in the area.
Wow.
And, yeah, they're in an area where, then later on, when I was walking back to my kayak from them, you know, it's only 15 feet from the channel that I was in. And you could see the trail they take, you know, which is yay wide, right back into the water. But they, as I said, they had this, so this is another year, and this is in Frag, but right next to the couch area and the cowtail stand. And they made a Quincy
It's neat.
Of course they do.
snow den.
They're otters.
And there was a lot of scat at the entrance, but you know, it's a little windbreak. It's got piled up, so the pond is right over here, and the wind would blow the snow into this mix of frag and cattail, and it drifted like 4 feet deep, and they just tunneled in. Well, the really interesting thing was down about 4 or 5 feet into this was a groundwater seep that never froze, and so they could access the water there and get out to the pond. So it was another way for them to, you know, are the parents, is the mom teaching the young about these different little tricks? Has anyone ever snowshoed across a frozen pond, and you're walking along, and you're in a marsh, you're not out in the middle of the pond? This happened to me once up at St. Lawrence University, and I went through. It was just snow, no ice. And I went through, and it was a groundwater seep. It didn't freeze. And so I had to, I have snowshoes on, so I had to fall back onto a little bit higher ground. And as I lifted my snowshoes out, which now has like, you know, each has 10, 15 pounds of slushy snow on it, I had like 24 little, I didn't identify them, little fish that all hung out in the seep because it didn't freeze. So, I don't know if otters tune into that. I would think they might, but I'm not sure. But kind of cool. Now, in the literature, you'll hear that one of the favorite places for otters to den, and one of the favorite places for them to rest, is beaver lodges. Usually with no beaver in there, but they apparently they will go into a beaver and poke around, an active beaver den, but I think that's kind of rare. But these are real favorite spots for otter to have their young. Beaver was another thing that got wiped out. In getting back to dispersal, actually, Mike and who's the other guy that did the eval with you, Hayden? From Montauk. Teddy.
Yeah.
So, it's 2 guys that work at Montauk State Park. Let's see if this will work. Yeah. Check this out. That's the ocean. They're at Hidden Hills in Montauk, and they're like, "What the hell is this?" They had their phone out.
Does he have a limp?
No, it's just exhausted.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Came right up out of the water.
Right to them.
Now this is near Montauk Point,
Yeah.
so it might have got set by the currents and had to come ashore. That from probably using that archipelago so this thing went across the road into Hither Woods where there's a pond and lived for a little bit over a year. Built a little den. There was no moving water, but it was. This is by the way, this is April. Dispersing young that made it to Long Island. They wash up dead occasionally on Long Island.
So
This is a slow-moving. John Coolidge says, yeah, otters are like the speedboat, and then beaver is like a tugboat. Slow, but they can carry a lot of weight. They can push a lot of things around.
So
Yeah.
you said, so I'm just looking, because I don't know my geography there, so I'm looking at Montauk Point. So where did it come from?
Okay, so, I got photos from the Fisher's Island Conservancy after I did that study in 2012, 2013. They keep in touch with me about unusual sightings. And twice a beaver showed up. There's no place for a beaver to set up shop, so it fed and left. The wildlife biologist on Plum Island emailed me twice. There's a beaver on Plum Island. Actually, there were 2 beavers on one visit to Plum Island. They never found the animal, but they found the cuttings. It can only be beaver. And then a roadkill showed up at Orient Point on the other fork. But this one came around from Montauk Point and made it.
How many miles is that now?
So the archipelago, it's 2 miles from Connecticut, Rhode Island to Fishers. And it's 4.5 miles from Fishers to Great Gull Island, where they have a research station for roseate terns. And then it's probably not even a mile from Great Gull Island to Plum Island. And then less than a mile from Plum Island to Orient. But as you said, a lot of challenging currents in various spots there. And so I get a lot of photos from people excited about, I saw a beaver, I saw an otter, I saw this and that. So what do you think this is? Not really a track and sign thing, but it's good to know different features of animals.
Beaver versus muskrat, what's the scale?
Yeah, there's no scale in the water. Yeah, you would never misidentify these on land, but this is a beaver. So this is the beaver. Actually, Juliana took this photo. It's kind of an arched thing. It's not really a pointed nose. The ears are very distinct. Yeah, it's tricky. But, so this is from a retired New York State DEC biologist who specialized in fisheries. And he's out at a site, a dam. He's standing on the dam with his grandson. And it's a project he worked on for many years to make a fish passage for alewives. So he's checking to see that it's being used. And he sent me this video. He's so excited. Saw his first live otters. Watch this. So there's a couple things going on in that, even though it's not zoomed into the animal. But what's one thing that you can see right away?
Power.
Their motion, their swimming motion. Where did they start and where did they go? What was safety for them? Yeah. They went to the shoreline. They went to land. They went to cover. See if I can play that again. Okay, so anyway, that was a pair of muskrat. And if you could zoom in on it, you could see the tail kind of doing that sideways motion, not the way an otter would swim. And the other thing I've noticed getting a lot of these photos, this was also identified as an otter. A muskrat though, muskrat often, I don't know, I have a theory, they often swim with their tail out of the water. So their tail, I found out, is not a key way for them to propel themselves. It's really the hind web feet. But in photos in the summertime when there's mats of algae and a lot of emergent not really emergent vegetation, but things like lily pads on the surface. They lift the tail out of the water, just more drag, I guess. But you can see it's, from this angle, it's fairly thick in this dimension, but to look down on it, it's quite thin. And this would be what? Of the semi-aquatic mammals, muskrat, mink, beaver, and otter. This is a characteristic of the river otter. And look at that muzzle. So this is called periscoping. And if you encounter an otter and it's aware of you, it will do this. You just got to watch it for seconds. So another question. So again, I'm studying the recolonization, and I repeated the survey in 2018, and this was where that pup was caught in a cage. The guy's koi pond was over in this area. So I'm like, holy smokes. So, you know, I found some latrines over in this swamp. This is Lake Ronkonkoma, well-known spot on Long Island. And these are the latrine sites along the Nissequogue River that I had documented. And there's a tributary that wraps up here. And I did find otter, in the wintertime, otters running across the ice and sliding here on this lake. And this was difficult. There are a lot of private property, a lot of tricky stuff to get access to. But look at this. It's so even if it made it down to this pond here, and here's the scale, 1 mile. It's got a 2.5, 3 mile direct through house, driveway, house, driveway, house, driveway. And they haven't been here for over 200 years. How did it, is that just a random dispersal thing that it found the Lake Ronkonkoma?
Could it be someone keeping her as pet and releasing it?
Yeah, they're pretty good about that. And also it was a family unit. Well, you know, I guess you can't rule that out, but
Are like streams or culverts? Like, are there any like even like buried stream channels?
okay, I forgot to mention this. So Lake Ronkonkoma and the associated marshes related that are connected to it are totally isolated. It's not like a I guess it would be a sub watershed of itself, but there's no hydraulic connection to any other place. It's almost like they have a sixth sense. This had happened a couple times. Unfortunately, one of the other times was a roadkill. Like, where was this thing going to? I could see where it was coming from, but I find a red maple swamp down the road I didn't even know about. That was in Manville. Anyway, another question. Yeah, do they have a way of sensing wetland habitat, riparian habitat? Then the other thing is, I assumed that these are all water bodies, marshes and whatnot. This is a freshwater pond. This is part of a estuary with the inlet here, and then it's a state park, and then this is the Nissequogue River, so down this way. This is over by Stony Brook. So I always assumed they're gonna travel between these watersheds in a highly fragmented, developed landscape by staying in water and hopping along to get access to these points here. But Long Island's shoreline is mostly sand. there's no structure, there's no cover. I'm not sure they're doing that, and I don't know, but it's a bit kind of a question. Could be that they choose to go overland even though it's highly developed. I did get a pup roadkill here. It was 4 or 5 months old. And this is the worst, the second worst roadkill site on Long Island. So we think this is the source of a natal den. It's owned by a power company and it's all chain link fence and you can't get in there. I got kicked out doing the survey. I had to find a neighbor to let me in there. A lot of latrines in this pond. So we've had, I think we're up to 3 roadkills at this site. It's a tricky one to mitigate. We'd have to put a culvert in. Anyway, yeah, a couple questions. So it's another thing I'm working on, by the way, is mitigating roadkills. That's really, it seems to be slowing their recolonization. And if it's a dam that they run into coming up a tidal creek and there's a freshwater pond on the other side of the dam, on Long Island, more than likely there's a road over the dam. So they can't, even if the dam is only 4 feet high, they can't get up the dam. And it's usually, what do they call that? The downstream part of the dam is like concreted to go under the bridge.
The spillway?
Spillway, the spillway. Yeah, it's usually concrete sides, concrete bottom, until it goes under the road. So they go up to the dam, they can't, they gotta go back and they gotta cross the road. So I can build a cinder block staircase, doesn't cost anything, it's, it's 4 feet high, it's, 12 cinder blocks. And again, otters, like, whoa, this is fun. I got this great video. I put a trail camera up and documented it. I've done 3 of them. And a pair, males travel together in groups, so it could be 2 males. They come up, across the pond to the dam. One goes right over down the stairway. The other one does a circle, sticks its nose down, backs up, disappears out of the frame. The other one comes up, goes over the dam, and then the 2 come back together. And one goes right down, the other follows. It's pretty cool. So, yeah, getting back into mapping their distribution, their home ranges. I did a latrine survey, and John Coolish from Hancock, New Hampshire, I met him when he was 73, I was 30, and we became very good friends, and he taught me a lot about otters and tracking in general. He was a super all-around naturalist. But we were always out in the snow. So I really didn't know what was going on at a latrine. I was just like, oh, there's scat. Okay. So then I come to Long Island, there's no snow, and I'm thinking, oh man, it's going to be tricky to do a latrine survey. No, it's the other way around. The snow covers the scat. They come by the latrines every 4 to 6 weeks, and the scat lasts a long time. You can find scat that's 2 months old easily. So anyway, I decided to set up some trail cams and see what was going on at latrines. So I have a couple of behaviors here. So this is a crossover latrine. There's water here, and there's a little berm. The otter comes out, rolls around, dries off. And so I thought, oh, I get it. So that's why the latrines don't have any underbrush or anything around. They're bare. They're so easy to spot. You could spot them from like 20 feet away. And when you're kayaking in places where it's all private property and I can't get access, I just put a boat in the water and boom, you could pick them in the winter. You do the latrine surveys are done like November through the spring. And the leaves aren't out yet, so it's real easy. Okay, then this is another one. Whoa, what's going on here? Now, I never saw this in the snow. This was covered. And that's called the scrape. It's basically the body width of the animal. And they make a pile of leaves and twigs, and they don't often scat on top of that. So the scrape, I'm not really sure. Like, what is the purpose of that? Is that another sign?
Maybe to refresh scent from previous visits. You know,
Okay, maybe to like to, or to make sure there's no scent there. Is that what you're saying, or refreshing?
Or to find out what the scent is from.
Oh, okay, so maybe they're sticking their nose down and trying to see what went on before they got there. I hadn't thought about that.
Well, aren't they depositing scent off of their feet as
Yeah,
well?
into the, yeah.
Yes, but did they use the hinds or the rears?
That was the fronts there.
Yeah. Okay, so then the next slide is what Sophie's getting at. So this is trail cam that I had set up, and it's the trail cam I retrieved when I flushed the mom and two pups out of the couches. A year after, not quite a year after this. So this is March 11th. Pups were born sometime in March, and this looks like a male and female. Watch the bigger one here. So it does a little scrape, and then does what we call the latrine dance. So it's urinating and defecating, and the urination's coming out here, so that's the male. So I think she had just had pups, and now she's receptive. She's going into estrus. She's receptive for mating. So that thing with the hind feet, to do this, they have glands on the rear feet, and they're depositing scent. It's not really related, though, to the scrape. That's the weird thing.
I wonder if the scrape partly is to make the scenting area, the latrine, more visually conspicuous. as
Yeah,
well.
that could be, or it's
Creating a
removing
substitute.
other things that have accumulated on top and exposing soil where the scent.
Right.
Good. I'm going to go
Yeah,
with that
too.
one.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with that one. I don't know if I have a photo of the rear feet. I might later on. So then to be efficient with where do you look for latrines? This is a latrine site. So back when I took this picture, I'm like, oh yeah, this is where the otters roll around and they scrape and they do everything. Not really. The otters are using things that are already cleared. This is where Canada geese have a nest. This is where great blue heron comes down to fish. There's a lot going on here. And I'll get into that a little bit later with a colleague of mine who actually published a paper on that. So anyway, where to look for latrines? Points of land. Oh, by the way, the point that goes out into the pond, just up here? So there's two latrines on the point. There's one at the very end on the right side, that part of the point, old scat. And then there's what we call a crossover latrine, where the otters come out of the water. Instead of swimming all the way around, they just run across the point. And that's what this is. So this is a point, and there's a pond over here, and this is a very active area where they just cross over from one pond to the other. And then on the point out here, the real fresh stuff is on the crossover latrine. So small islands is another good place to look, where they have to get out of the water, provided there's some cover to get around in a structure like a dam. So they love those earthen dams that we have on Long Island, where there's trees and shrubs growing on the earthen dam. Then the shortest overland route between two waterways. So I can use that for mapping and minimize my search effort. Just looking at topographic maps and Google Earth.
Could you explain what point of land?
Points of land, there's a waterway, and there's a little peninsula sticking out, a very narrow peninsula. At the tip of the peninsula, they'll often have a latrine site. This, I didn't get, this is all well documented in the literature, but this one, again, the literature is very heavily biased towards inland sites. And there's not a lot of literature dealing with coastal areas. And what I found is that I could have all of these criteria at a site, meters or around 15 feet of swimmable water for an otter. So if you have a steep embankment going down to a tidal creek, that works. But it's got to be close to swimmable water. This was a white pine.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. I
Eval.
can't-
Yeah. So this, I use this as, there's always exceptions to the rule. So this is an eval we did with, I think it was Nate. And this is an oxbow tidal creek. And this is all paddocks, part-time paddocks. And the otters, instead of swimming all the way around, they're like headed somewhere, and they just cut across. And there was a latrine right here. So it's going to be inundated on a full or new moon tide or a storm, but yeah, like I said, always exceptions to the rule. This is in the Peconic River, not tidal. This portion is it's just low water in the summertime. And guy sent me this photo. This is otter scat and the otter scream. Just, you know, no swimmable water in sight. I guess it had to go. And this is the classic situation. So this is a point of land is on a freshwater pond in Shelter Island. There's a drop off here, a steep drop off to deep water. This is the fish scat, and this is the scrape. So that's what you're looking for. This is fresh scat. It's it sometimes comes in tubular form, but most of the scat I find is just this kind of a splat. And this greenish mucus is all the fish scales and fish bones are embedded in this mucus. We think that it sheds part of the intestinal lining, which protects the intestines from damage from bones and sharp structures.
So that intestinal lining is shed sort of with some regularity?
That all the scat is in this mucus-like material.
Oh, to protect?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's part of the whole deal.
Excuse me, Mike. How often do you find that kind of whitish mucus?
Well, I'll get to that.
Okay.
I'll get to that. So, and this has a little more of a tubular shape to it. It has a distinctive smell. And just John Coolidge, you know, he never walked by scat without picking it up, breaking it apart, what's in it, what are they eating, you know, he can tell by the size of the scales, and you know, he'd smell it. So very easy to distinguish raccoon from otter with the smell test. It hangs on to that smell. It's not an unpleasant smell, quite what, but I've since learned that the sniff test, if you pick up old raccoon scat, you might inhale some eggs of some kind of a dangerous thing. I forget what it's called.
Roundworm.
Yeah.
So don't.
May kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah, they kill you.
On
If
rare
you think it
occasion,
might
go to
be
your brain.
raccoon.
So I kind of, I hold off on doing that.
Hey, you probably have antibodies to that.
And then, you know, and they usually it's a flat surface. They don't generally use steep slopes on a flat surface, so it dries out, and you know it hangs around for like, you know, definitely for 6 weeks. So it's very useful in terms of you don't have to be there right away. You just need to get there within 2 months of the deposit. Now this was a tricky one for me. This had the big picture, and we talked about the big picture, the bird's eye view. This was like, oh, this is an audible stream. This is a perfect site. What the hell is this? This looks weird. Definitely doesn't look like fish scales and fish bones. There's no greenish, blackish slime. There's berries in here. It's like berry, some kind of seed, some kind of berry. This really bugged me. So I collected this and took it home. And
Hold on, Mike.
I rinsed it out. I mean, to me, it's like, okay, maybe a raccoon deposited at an otter latrine. That's a possibility. And what I found was these hard objects had a divot in them, and they were gastroliths. So it was feeding on crayfish. Otters will travel overland for a mile to get a nice dinner of crayfish. They love crayfish.
Excuse me, Mike. I'm curious about this. So seeds. Can you talk about the seeds?
Okay, yeah, sorry. The seeds were not seeds.
Okay, good.
They're
Never mind.
gastroliths.
But that
They're
was
these
confusing me. Gotcha.
structures. So crayfish is going to shed its exoskeleton.
Okay.
It pulls all of the calcium in to regrow the new shell faster than, and it's fresh water. So it's not in the salt water. The crabs don't need to do that.
Lobsters do.
Did you mention that to me this week?
I haven't talked to you about it, but I've actually found them.
Yeah, someone else mentioned that to me.
Gastroliths in the lobster.
That makes sense.
And it's possible, yes, it's possible, we have gastroliths here that someone brought, that they might be in an area where they could get lobster. I don't think on Long Island, but possibility.
Yeah, Mike, is that all crayfish
Yeah.
contents in the scat? Because that looks different than other crayfish scats I've seen.
This
so.
is like hours old, still warm. And when I rinsed this and put it through a sieve, this material was all shelled. It looks like leaf matter or vegetable matter, but it was all crayfish parts. And then this is what you were referring to. I rarely see this for two reasons. One is it's not a regular deposit. It's an anal jelly that dries out very quickly and disappears in a matter of days. If you could get this is the best stuff to use for genetic testing, for DNA work. You can get the fingerprint of the animal. So,
Yeah, do you know the why?
it's an anal secretion. We don't know. We don't know what the purpose of this is.
Coming from anal scent.
Yeah, we don't know anything about this. So,
So does this?
John Coolish, again, he's self-taught naturalist. So he put 2 and 2 together and got like 8. He says to me, "Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about." He goes, "I think they're coughing that up because it looks like phlegm." And then he goes, "Yeah, why would they're coughing up? They got fish bones stuck in there, coughing it up." But it comes out of the anus. Yeah.
On the left, I have seen Fisher anal secretions similar.
It's closely related, yeah. And Fisher also have the pedal glands too.
Like,
Yeah.
so does that jelly thing smell?
Yeah, it has the same not unpleasant odor as their scat. Yeah, it's coming out of the same spot
Okay.
in terms of the anus, but I don't know where it originates from. And so on Long Island we have places, and I'm sure elsewhere, where there's a nice freshwater pond, great habitat, and it's a wooded swamp, and you can't find a dry, elevated area anywhere near open water, and so there's no potential latrine sites. It could be a marsh. It could be a big frag stand on a tidal creek. They're not averse to using man-made structures. So this is a nature conservancy preserve, and they come out of the water as a lookout. There's a boardwalk going out through the frag where you can see the tidal creek. They'll climb up onto the boardwalk and leave scat. Okay, this is at the Row Center. It was a track and sign meeting there some years ago. I think John Young and George Leoniak were there. So I was walking around one day, and here's the pond. And there's a little, some kind of a hole that the otter went into here. I don't know if it was an resting den for the day or it was access to the pond. The pond was frozen. And here's its tracks coming up, and I'm like, holy smokes, what the hell is this? It had arranged pieces of the witch's broom over here into a little platform. I don't think of otters as being very dexterous, like a raccoon. Like blown away. I made a note of the time. I go running back to George and John. You gotta check this out. And they did. So we come back. I guess it was just before lunch. Yeah, 12:45. So just 2 hours later, and there's fresh otter scat on top of the sticks.
So the otter scat was not there before?
Right. Right. And, George, and they never seen anything like this before. Oh,
It's not surprising to me because the scent is going to endure on that
Exactly.
longer than the snow.
exactly. But never heard this mentioned by anybody. Yeah, pretty cool. Oh, then the other thing is, I do a lot of training. Long Island's a big place for me to monitor by myself. So I've recruited a lot of volunteers to help do surveys or keep an eye on different sites that don't have otter sign yet, but it's perfect otter habitat to document their expansion and their distribution. And I run into some things like this occasionally. So these are huge bones and scales, and it's a perfect otter site in terms of the physical characteristics, but I can't say that's otter scat or feeding sign, because there's a lot of other things that utilize these latrine sites. This was on an earthen dam on the North Shore, freshwater pond on one side, Tidal Creek on the other, and it's like all these little fish bones and fish scales scattered around there. Like no other, no scrapes or anything, and they're kind of intact. I don't know, something about it looked a little fishy. And then I found this, where the scats were in these, like, I don't know. What do you think?
Those look like pellets.
Yes. So there was osprey, there was a kayak rack, and there was whitewash stains on it, and this was just above where the pellets were, and this was osprey pellets. They regurgitated pellets. So we always think of owls as regurgitating pellets, but a lot of birds do it. Kingfisher and herons, egrets. This is an unusual sign. This guy's a school teacher, and he does awesome stuff with his trail cam work. He's a really good naturalist. Anyway, I mentioned that you sometimes can see push-ups. Another thing John Coolidge taught me. When the ice is just forming, we don't have severe winters on Long Island, and they're feeding. But they pop up, unless they have a huge carp or something like that, they just eat right in the pond. They do the periscoping thing, so they're vertical in the water, they eat the fish, and they go back down and get another fish. And they create these holes, like 6 to 8 inches in diameter, and you can see the ice is pushed up onto where the hole was made from underneath. And this is a little flood and stuff from feeding on the fishing port. And this is more of a natural thing with these like spiderweb fisheries. And I found a paper a guy wrote. I couldn't understand it, but it was this technical paper about how these things form. It's kind of fascinating. If anyone wants that, I could forward it on to you. But it was way over my head. And this is a pond in, right near where I found the furthest west otter sign. It's called Lower St. Francis Pond. And there were, it was pockmarked with all these push-ups in the otters. That used to be, this pond used to have the biggest latrine on Long Island. Then the land got purchased by the county. It's private ownership. And the land trust somehow got convinced that they needed to do like a bench and a view over the pond, so they went in with a small bulldozer and they scraped all the leaves away, this one area, and they actually did a freshwater wetland violation. They cut a lot of the emergent shrubs, woody shrubs along the shoreline. And the otters abandoned that latrine. I took them to task on that.
Good
The damage was done. Why did you do this? What were you thinking? Like, no one said anything. And so I mentioned other things used the latrine. This great blue heron, I don't know if it was the same individual. I have lots of, once a week would come down to the latrine, perch at the edge, and spear. Someone told me that's a bass, freshwater bass. And the Canada geese are known to nest very early, so there's still snow on the ground. They'd already laid eggs, they were incubating eggs. And the otters, this is a crossover latrine, so here's the pond and here's the nest. And the otters come from the other pond over here. And he wants to make a deposit and check the latrine, who's been here, yada yada. And the male comes out, walking like this, and man. I don't have any audio on this over but I'm thinking, oh my God, this is going to be a fight. The otters, he's looking for trouble, and the otter's just going to dispatch him like that. No, they hung out face to face for like 5 seconds, and then, all right, I'll come back another time, and the otter left. Pretty cool. And Tom Surface, who's the head of the North American River Otter Specialist Group, and some other people published this cool thing. So he found that there's so much going on at these latrine sites, and as I said before, I assumed it was the otters that created the open area and knocked out all the underbrush and plants and made this barren ground that's easy to detect when you're doing surveys. Now, all sorts of things are coming by there. So, kind of interesting. Now, the number one thing on Long Island that is visiting the latrine sites every night, otters are coming by maybe every 4 weeks, is this animal that actually doesn't come out of the water. This wouldn't be a latrine site because this is too shallow. But the otters, if this was a pond, they'd come out, do that thing, and go back in. And there would be a game trail there. This animal goes along at night along the edge. What would that be? The raccoon, yeah. So when I'm doing training workshops, the main thing is to teach people how to identify raccoon sign from otter sign. But there's a lot of other things that I get. So this is from the naturalist on Fisher's Island. And she said, oh, yeah, I got beautiful river otter tracks and the tail and everything, And the tail throws so many people. So what's this?
Opossum.
Muskrat?
Oh, muskrat.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can draw a straight line across the rear toes. And then I think of the middle 3 toes as forming like an arc. are like crowned. You can see it here, well, you can see it here really nice. There's the high straight line and then a nice clean arc line like that. Even though it's in the rodent family, it's not quite the straight line across the three middle toes. And they do a lot of tail dragging. So they raise the tail when they're in the water and they lower it on the ground. What's going on? This is from a guy, Matt Kalin, who's really knowledgeable about carnivorous plants. And he was at this bog area photographing. And he goes, oh my God, a tail drag, this has got to be a river otter. This is 8 to 10 inches wide, the outer dimensions. And what would that be? So you got two different feet. You got a roundish foot, and you got a oval foot.
Turtle.
Yeah, that's a snapping turtle, right?
Thank God for Bob's eval this morning.
What's that?
So thank God for Bob's eval this
Yeah.
morning.
Yeah, those were good. Those were good casts. And then this is the main thing. And I have to admit, I messed this up myself. I'm on Martha's Vineyard visiting Luann and Liz, who just finished doing a river otter study, and they helped me out with the Fisher's Island survey. We only had a couple of days to do that. And they take me to one of their latrine sites, and it's different from any I've found on Long Island. It's just sand. They come out of this salt pond, and they roll around, and there's the tail drag, and you can see the whiskers marks, and it's just beach sand. And so I'm like, oh, I got to get a picture of this. And there's perfect prints. I take a picture of it. It's a raccoon. And I put it on a brochure. And Callie Belmacos, who some of you might remember, was like, Mike, this is you. I can't believe it. I'm like, she embarrassed me a lot. So, yeah, the raccoon. And a couple things about, I think I have some photos. How are we doing for time, by the way? We started at 12?
We started at 11.
11.
Oh, so we got, this is it. We got.
We're coming towards the end.
Yeah, okay. So, I made that mistake twice. I mean, probably a couple other times that I might not even remember. So I'm all excited. I got the otter coming out from the latrine site. It's headed towards the marsh with the couches. And it's doing this belly flop. And I'm like, oh man, perfect. I can follow the... Now this is, I can do some trailing if it's snow. No, I still messed it up. So, comes over here, I'm on the edge of the marsh, and I'm following the trail around and around and around, and finally I realized, this doesn't seem right. Why is it just going around the edge of the pond? And I realized, this guy came down, walked on the otter trail, and I'm following the raccoon sign. Oh, bummer. So, yeah, tricky guy. Raccoons were very rare on Long Island back when the raccoon coat sprint style. So back in like the 20s, 30s, 40s. And they made a rebound. But now they do this boom bust thing. It's a mesopredator. There's nothing that knocks their population down. We have the red fox and the raccoon. Those are our top predators, basically. And this goes through a cycle where it gets diseases. And then they have mass die-off. You can see there's metal ear tags on this in a park where they were studying the population, and they broadcast bait to eliminate, I think it was canine distemper in the park. Anyway, mass die-off. I was finding dead raccoons everywhere. So raccoon front foot is very fingery, they're very dexterous. And notice the toe pads are not really pronounced. It's very much in line like our fingers. And the raccoon, this was, I think it was Elbrock that that really described this well and really worked for me was the bulbous topaz with gap and fur. So there's no connection in the track as much as there is with otter. So those are two fronts. That's otter on the right, raccoon on the left. And then the rear feet, even though the rear feet are a lot bigger, they're about the same width, but it's very limited in splaying. And sometimes the front foot shows up looking bigger than the rear foot. And this is the otter rear foot with these, they're smaller than a dime. There's 4 tabs. They look like little bits of Velcro. And they are connected to a gland that secretes some kind of a scent. And that's what they do with the rear feet. And these are on the fisher, I believe, as well. Now, the other thing that surprised me, because I started collecting roadkills for the DEC to do necropsies on. You can't see any webbing on the rear foot from underneath. And it's so pronounced. I was like, oh, wait. Yeah. And then you could see the drop toe. Or you orient that right. Right in this, it looks like this would be the drop toe. But in the track, it's actually, I think this is the drop toe. I might have that reversed. Because I think that's a left. And yeah, so this is a front, and it looks a little wider anyway. So the heel pad doesn't often register with the raccoon. But in terms of identifying it, it doesn't matter if you see the left or the right. It's just a matter of seeing the difference, where you have the connection to the palm pad, and here you have kind of a gap to the what is this, the carpal, the technical term? And then you got metacarpal, and then you have the dropped inner toe on the hind foot. But you can see how it would be hard to confuse the otter's front foot with the raccoon. So what I stress to people is the gait to distinguish these. And this is the traditional raccoon gait. And if you draw a line across the front or the rears, you get this alternating diagonal in their walking gait. And in the snow, it's key, because you really can't really see even how many toes there are. But you can do that diagonal. So it's great for beginners. And then one thing Elbrock doesn't mention that I saw a lot when I first started studying them up in New Hampshire, in deep snow, the otter does this 2x2 bound where the rears land right in where the fronts were. I don't see that on Long Island because we don't really have much snow, and it's not deep snow. So we usually have this more traditional 3x3. And in good conditions, you can identify, front, right, rear. So I probably should stop there because we're way over. But the other things I'm studying are the eastern coyote, the mammal survey, and spotted turtle. Now, spotted turtle, tracking is not really a helpful thing. With that, it's a long-term monitoring study. So I capture them and I mark them and release them. I'm a big fan of basic ecological monitoring of populations, and I'm following the protocols of the Spotted Turtle Working Group on this. So the goal is to have 2 long-term monitoring sites per state within its range. However, I took this study over from John Baylor, who passed away some years ago, famous herpetologist. And one thing I learned from him was he used to hand capture a lot of turtles, spotted turtles. And I'm like, how the hell did he do this? You know, in his notes, HC, hand capture. And it's the search image. It's a search image. It's sort of a tracking skill. And then also, they're on the edge of the water. They drop in when you get close
Yes.
before you see them. And there's a certain noise it makes versus a frog. It's a heavy plunk. Yeah, it's terrible. And they just go down into the sediment. So you feel around. There it is. That was a cool skill. Anyway, thanks for
Thanks so much, Mike.